Hi once again, everyone. It is weather for Weather Geeks, the midweek edition. This is September 12th, 2018, and we're going to take a deep dive into, of course, our local weather, but we're going to talk a fair amount about the hurricane because it is our big national weather story this evening. And, of course, a lot of people have friends and relatives down in the Carolinas who hopefully evacuated by this point, especially if they live in the eastern third of the state, say. And, of course, a lot of interest around here as to whether or not we will see any impacts from Florence. Here, we'll get into that in just a second. Let's start out, before we get to our local weather, with kind of the broad picture here. Tropical advisories extend from Norfolk and Virginia Beach right down through all of eastern North Carolina and much of eastern South Carolina as well. These are the hurricane watches, warnings, and tropical storm watches and warnings. Also, storm surge, going to be a big problem. And so storm surge warnings are up for a lot of eastern North Carolina and down through Myrtle Beach and even just south of there in South Carolina. A lot of these bays and inlets in North Carolina especially are going to be really in rough shape, I think, before the weekend is through. Certainly with the storm probably coming in something like this before it starts to recurve back west and southwest. I'll get into the track in a minute, but this sort of a track is going to bring a lot of water up on the east side of this and up into Wilmington and places northeast of there. And storm surge levels could be up to 15 to 20 feet in some spots. That's going to cause some big-time problems. Catastrophic flooding is going to be the legacy of this storm. It's not going to be the wind. Yes, the wind is a problem for coastal areas in particular, but the rain and the storm surge, unfortunately, it's almost guaranteed there's going to be some fatalities out of this. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of reports today of residents choosing to ride this out, especially in areas that are just going to be inundated with rain and storm surge. You know, and that's just, it's unbelievable that people are choosing to do that, but that's what we've seen according to some reports today. But look at these rainfall totals. Now, this is just one run of the European model, but other data is kind of fairly in line with this. It's going to be a tremendous amount of rain. Probably somewhere between 1 foot and 2 feet of rain in some spots across southeastern North Carolina, parts of eastern South Carolina as well, including Myrtle Beach and heading up towards Ocean Isle Beach, the Wilmington area as well. Amounts get lower once you get off to the north into northeastern North Carolina, but even far to the west, Charlotte area, Greensboro, Columbia, places like that, there's going to be a lot of rain coming because the forward speed of this thing is not going to be very fast as it makes landfall. And after that, wave heights, earlier on today, I posted a retweet of a buoy that registered, it was like 83-foot wave in the northeastern quadrant of this. Now that's kind of an anomaly, but still near the eye wall, some waves. It's certainly realistic to expect some waves of 40 feet or so contained in very close proximity to that eye wall with the hurricane. Now, as this approaches land and we start to lose some wind speed, I would not expect waves to be quite that high, but still, it's a lot of water. And as of the 5 o'clock advisory this evening, Florence was a Cat 3. It actually weakened a little bit today. There was a possibility that this would ramp up to a minimal Cat 5, but that looks to be off the table at this point. A little bit of wind shear, just enough perhaps to put a halt to any strengthening and even cause a slight weakening trend today. The eye doesn't look quite as impressive as it did. It's a little raggedy looking on the south side of this, and the pressure has come up a tick. Now, all this being said, it's still very dangerous, and we are not expecting any sort of dramatic weakening before landfall. So it's going to make landfall as at least a Cat 3, perhaps a low-end Cat 4. Now, the track, since I recorded yesterday's video, has changed some, including, just kind of a bizarre turn that's likely to occur here because, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let me take my camera off here. Because of the influence of high pressure building across the northern tier of states, it's going to shove this thing west to eventually southwest for a time. So, and it's also, just look how much this is slowing down. It starts interacting with land probably Thursday night, and between Friday at 2 a.m. and Friday at 2 p.m., look how little it moves. I mean, just barely moving. And then from Friday 2 p.m. to Saturday 2 p.m., a full calendar day, just not moving very much. So this is just going to unleash tremendous amounts of rain. Even though the storm will be weakening, the rain is just going to be unbelievably impressive. So right now, the hurricane force winds extend out from the center probably about 50 to 60 miles. The tropical storm force winds extend out from the center probably close to 150 miles. And as this begins coming near the coast, of course, the hurricane strength winds will begin to to shrink a little bit as some friction gets involved. When tropical systems start interacting with land, you start getting some friction. It starts getting cut off from its water supply. Also, because of the slow movement as it approaches landfall, the water is going to start to cool underneath the hurricane. We call that upwelling, where the cooler waters from underneath the surface of the ocean start coming up, and cooler waters tend to have a weakening effect on tropical systems. So all that will occur near the landfall Thursday night into Friday. So the odds of tropical storm force winds, very, very high, of course. As the system approaches landfall and kind of hugs the coast, chances of hurricane winds, highest odds right now around the Wilmington area, Cape Lookout as well, with lower odds up towards Hatteras. And these odds will continue to go up as it makes its south and westward turn back towards Myrtle Beach, I think, over the upcoming weekend. All right, so impacts here. We do not want to give you the message that we are expecting any sort of big impacts around here. Impacts, yes. Big impacts, flooding rains, big problems seem very, very unlikely. If you're seeing any sources out there saying that that sort of a situation is likely, to me that's not great information at this point. But nonetheless, this plume of tropical models all take the remnant eventually up through the Ohio Valley early next week. May arrive as early as Monday. It's probably more likely Monday night and into the day on Tuesday. But it's going to be moving along pretty quickly at that point. And of course, in a much weakened state, it's going to start getting picked up by the jet stream a little bit. And so the remnants will be trucking along at a pretty good clip. So European model is the low end here as far as rain through next Wednesday with only about 1/4 of an inch. The GFS, including the GFS ensemble, closer to an inch. But even if we get the high end, that's not going to be enough to cause major problems. The rivers have receded since we had the rainfall over the weekend, so I'm not expecting big-time impacts from Florence around here. Some rain, yes. Time-lapse from today. It's nice to see the sun locally today. After a kind of a cloudy, overcast, gloomy start, we had a fair amount of sun this afternoon. Got a little warmer than expected due to a little bit of bonus sunshine out there today, a little more sunshine than we were bargaining for. It also was a little more humid today with dew points creeping up into the mid-60s. We have kept the spotty shower or thunderstorm chance in the forecast for tomorrow afternoon. Don't think it's going to be much. Real hit or miss stuff. I've got the chance at 30%. It's probably 20 to 30% chance of a quick shower or a storm. Friday looks even drier. I can't totally rule out a quick 5-minute shower, but for high school football, I think we're in good shape Friday evening, and I think the weekend will be dry as our lawns continue to dry out. A lot of people need to mow. A lot of people may have taken care of that today, but if your yard's still swampy, with not much rain occurring over the next few days, yard work forecast for the weekend should be pretty good. Now, it is going to be pretty muggy through the weekend and into early next week. Now, once what's left of Florence gets a kick east, I think we'll get some drier area in for the second half of next week. And this is the 8 to 14 day outlook showing the heat centered out here. It doesn't look like a real chilly pattern for us, but it does look like a pretty comfortable mid to late September pattern taking shape as we go into the medium range. I'll have an update on Florence before the newscast tonight on social media, and I'll have a full recap of today's events locally and down in the Carolinas and what we can expect with Florence going into the upcoming weekend tonight on 21 News at 11 in another edition of Weather for Weather Geeks, right back here tomorrow evening.